Welcome to the future. Welcome to Bitcoin, Bit2Meros. Another afternoon. What a pleasure to be back with all of you on this February 6th, 2025. As always, our friend Giovanny is with us. Here at the controls, always fully engaged with the community. How's it going, Giovanny? How are you?
Hi, Javi. The truth is, it's a pleasure, as always. Welcome to this new live stream that we're doing this year. We have some very interesting things to share, especially the updates we've had in January and even part of December. That said, welcome everyone. I've been checking that we also have quite a few people asking questions and greeting us in both Telegram and the chat. And Javi, the truth is you have a lot to tell us. In fact, along the lines of Bitcoin, how it's doing, what to expect in the next 2 months, and what has happened in these days. The truth is, it's always great to hear you a bit along those lines.
Well, we like to do a recap as Giovanny is increasing. Also, before anything else, I want to take a moment to acknowledge those of you who are in the live stream. Luis, Elvi, who never misses a beat. We already miss you greeting us. Esteban, Geray, Kaiser, well, I'm using. Lando, Kim, Axor Coins, Sharona. Well, it's a pleasure to be with all of you. Let's go. Yes.
In fact, they were saying that someone from the early days was missing, so
everything's going really well on that front. Well, we just got back from El Salvador. We've been in this country that's making history. We'll tell you a bit more about it later. As Giovanny mentioned, we're going to do a little recap because the promise for this year, 2025, is that everything is going to change, that everything is already changing. As you know, those of you who have been with us for a while in the ecosystem, both what Bitcoin means and Bit2Me, we've chosen a series of graphs and the content that I think is important is super recent. I mean, this is taken from the fact that new news comes out every day in the ecosystem, and we would like to share it with you to know what you think, if you feel bullish, if you feel bearish, because it is true that despite all the news coming out, Giovanny, I don't know if you feel the same way, there's this feeling that things just aren't taking off. What's going on? Right. We have reached 100, we have reached 108, and we are there like in a lateral range that reminds me a lot that we've had from March of last year until around October. Before the US elections, we were stuck between 73 and 50, and it was tough. It was a real desert journey, Giovanny. So let's start with a graph. As you know, I like to zoom out to take a step back with the data and see what the transition has been, what the journey has been over so many years. And here what you can see, if I'm not mistaken, if Jose has found the graph, we have a logarithmic graph of Bitcoin. What does that mean? Well, the graph you see here shows us the historical evolution of Bitcoin's price on a scale, so we can see it clearly. Since the year, if I'm not mistaken, 2010. So here what we can see is that the halvings stand out, and they impact, as you know, the new supply of Bitcoin. The last halving was in April. The colors of the dots represent the time left until the next halving. So the red would indicate that there's a long time left, while the blue would show a closer proximity to when there will be another halving. So then the gray lines you see that are kind of stepped reflect the reduction in the issuance of new Bitcoins. That's exactly when the halvings occur. So this graph allows us to see how in previous cycles the price has behaved, how it heats up as it gets closer to the next halving or moves away from the last halving, and how it reaches that stepped gray line. What you can see is a bit of the price projection based on the goal we want to reach. So, well, this is basically what it creates is an increase in scarcity. And with that, as you know, upward pressure. And as demand grows, which is what's happening now, the price reaches higher and higher peaks. So, well, I don't know if you are familiar with this graph. There's an account called Plan B that usually shares updated information about the performance it's having. We just placed the first little orange dot, and historically after the elections, what usually happens is, well, a takeoff. Now that's true. Well, there are people who are still a bit restless or anxious because altcoins against Bitcoin have lost market dominance. They haven't really taken off. And Bitcoin, well, it's kind of in a sideways range. I don't know what you think, Giovanny. At this point, I want to make a note. If you think we've reached the market peak, or if you believe there are still months left in the bull market, and also if you want to comment on it in the live chat, if you think we've already reached the peak, or if you believe this is just about to start, now that we have this graph in front of us.
I would say that what's happening is that it's just about to start, actually. precisely in line with the noise that there has been with the meme coins behind, etc., it has made people start to get a little more interested, and they often come in for that type noise, so to speak, which are the meme coins, but then they start to really understand what is behind them. In this case, Bitcoin. I've also seen, and when we discuss and talk with other people, entrepreneurs, we notice that people are more interested at an institutional level, both in companies. So I think we're in the best moment from my point of view to start implementing certain strategies that can be very simple and even increase our knowledge. Because, for example, in the Telegram group and other sites, we have seen that people are eager to get started because they already somehow believe that they understand Bitcoin, and they want to say, well, what tools are there to get started? To put it into practice in some way, but in a safe and responsible manner. In response to your question, I think we're in the best moment. I believe there's still a lot of value to be added in terms of education. Because as you were, for example, in El Salvador, I think you somehow saw that there was a need for that education or tools to put it into practice.
Sure, we'll also talk about El Salvador later. I see there's a poll that we encourage you to respond to. Do you think we've reached the peak of Bitcoin? For now, Giovanni, with about 20 votes, 6% say yes and 94% say no. Let's hope it's not the typical thing that's usually said, that most people are wrong. I also believe that there's still a lot ahead in 2025 and that we've just begun. Let's move on, if you want, Jose, to the next graph. Well, to the next one. Yes. The next one. Yes. The next one. Next diagram to the next forecast, which basically shows us the possible price targets for Bitcoin for the year 2030. So here we have three scenarios. As you can see, we have the pessimistic one. Okay. We have what would be a baseline analysis, and we have the optimistic one. So what are these scenarios based on? Well, it's based on the different rates of compound annual growth. This is called CAGR in English, okay? Which is, well, the compound annual growth. It takes the price into account from the point you reach and then the percentage on which that last price grows. So the projections up to 2030, as you can see there, these letters mean compound annual growth rate. It would be like compound growth. It's a metric that ultimately indicates the average rate at which the investment is growing annually over a period of time, in this case, until 2030. So in the pessimistic scenario, what can we see? Well, we're talking about Bitcoin at $300,000, which would be a annual growth of about 21%. In the event that if this were to happen, what we would see is that we would have institutional investors in purple, the store of value, which would be related to gold, would be in yellow. So this scenario assumes a growth, not very large, moderate in adoption, with some barriers that will slow down its expansion at a certain point. Then we would have the second case, which would be a price of $710,000, which would mean an annual growth of 40% each year. So here, Bitcoin would achieve wider adoption and would also be classified as a safe haven by the markets, which would be the red part you see there. There would also be integration into corporate treasuries, which we're seeing with MicroStrategy, and we would also see it with other companies. And in this scenario, Bitcoin would position itself as a much more robust global asset, with increasing institutional participation and in emerging economies. I'm not talking about altcoins here because altcoins lack, as you know, except for Ethereum, which also has ETF approvals, for that type of products to be approved, because if those types of products aren't approved, it's very difficult for money to flow into Bitcoin on such a massive scale. And with Bitcoin, you also have to consider that if there is then having been launched in 2017 or 2020 and continuing to issue new units to reach a higher market capitalization, they would need more investment. And also consider that all the money that was invested in Bitcoin in previous cycles is not going to drain. It's not going to go to some altcoin, right? Like it used to happen, because, for example, when you buy the Bitcoin ETF, that money stays there. It doesn't drain into other cryptocurrencies. And the optimistic scenario, which would be talking about 1.5 million by the year 2030, this would mean an interest, or in other words, this would be a compound growth of 58% each year, okay? 58% until 2030, and this would be the most positive. So you have in orange the part of state treasuries, which is something we're hearing about, the topic of strategic reserves. We would have decentralized financial services built on Bitcoin, which would be the light blue part. And here, Bitcoin would basically become a fundamental pillar of global economies. And it would be a reserve asset and would also facilitate services, financial, decentralized. So here in summary, basically, we have how Bitcoin could go. From a somewhat more pessimistic case, let's say, which would be the one at $300,000 with those actors, with those players, and how we could move to a much more positive scenario, which is the one that talks about up to 1.5 million. This is something they are handling. The analysts and the most important investment funds in the world, they're talking about Bitcoin from here to, in 5 years, it would be at worst 300,000 and at best 1.5 million. We'll see. I mean, these are estimates, so don't take it as investment advice, but keep it in mind. I don't know, Danny.
Yes, Javi. Along those lines, you know that sometimes people are added with a more noble understanding. It explains in a few words what ETFs are and what the difference is. So do I really own that Bitcoin? Am I the owner of that Bitcoin, or can I just buy and sell it? How does it work a bit, and why is it aimed at institutions, more or less so that we're all on the same page?
Okay, so ETFs would be a product, a vehicle, let's say like a rail that traditional companies like BlackRock and Fidelity open up. So for those companies to offer their clients exposure to Bitcoin, they do it through a product called an ETF, which in English stands for Exchange Traded Fund. So it's a product where they package and sell to clients. In this case, the underlying asset, which is Bitcoin, the underlying asset would be what that vehicle, that package contains. So what's the difference, as Giovanni said, between buying it on Bit2Me or buying it in an ETF? Well, in Bit2Me, you are the owner of the Bitcoin if you want. If you want, you can take it out of Bit2Me and move it to a cold wallet or a wallet that you control and you directly control that Bitcoin. However, no.
So if I have an ETF, I wouldn't be able to go and use that wallet, so to speak, to pay for something directly in cryptocurrencies, in Bitcoin. That does happen, for example, in Bit2Me. If you have it, for example, in Bit2Me, you can pay directly with it, exchange it, take it to other places, like you said, to a self-custody wallet.
Sure. So there are two different uses, two different ways of understanding it. Buying it through Bit2Me allows you to enjoy the technology. Those who buy it through an ETF do so basically as an investment. But why is it important to understand this? Because for the price, obviously, having a vehicle, having a tool that allows large capital to come in and buy Bitcoin through an ETF is really beneficial for people who are used to working with these kinds of instruments. Okay, so, well, that's a bit of it. And for the market to grow, in the end, Giovanni, it's true that we like Bitcoin to go from the bottom up for everyday people to adopt it, so to speak, but we also use it as a means of payment, which is a bit of the concept, not just of Bitcoin. But of course, there's a phrase I heard in El Salvador during a talk that I really liked, because they said, hey, if Bitcoin is adopted by governments and institutions, we will have lost the vision of Satoshi Nakamoto, because Satoshi Nakamoto, what he was looking for, or the purpose of Bitcoin is to decentralize money, right? However, if it's hoarded, if it's accumulated by states, central banks, and governments, then that kind of distorts the goal that Satoshi had. So there are people who say, we have lost. Well, I don't think so. I think that I'm going to say this in quotes, it's not that they're enemies, but that your enemy wanting to use Bitcoin is a clear sign that it's a success, that it's such a powerful and interesting technology that even they see that they may lose power and want to accumulate it.
The reality is that it is part of global adoption, because really the majority of users, of people, when they really value it or listen to it and want it, to know a bit more about them, when they hear that it's Elon Musk or the president or that country, then it's part of it. It's necessary for that global adoption, because if we only focus on decentralization and the philosophy of freedom, it becomes a bit more complicated to go down that path of global adoption, so that they can come in. Because for you to be able to, for example, for companies to pay directly with cryptocurrencies, those companies need to be somehow regulated and aligned with that, with platforms like Pay2Me, just like a government accepting it, etc. And that's where global adoption is needed. Otherwise, we end up like the current geeks And that's not exactly the idea of Satoshi Nakamoto either, but rather for it to be something global.
Sure, exactly. So, well, let's continue with the topic of the diagrams of the countries, which is something I also think is important to look at. On one hand, there's the adoption that we can make as individuals, and then there's that of the countries. What you can see here is an international race, I believe, to establish Bitcoin as a strategic reserve, which is advancing, as you can see here, unevenly in various countries. Here, if you look for the flag of Spain, we won't see it, unfortunately, but well, it is what it is. So the graph shows the key steps, the public support, well, of governments, and the beginning of a process that can be known as legislative, which is the enactment of laws or policies at the end, to then have the acquisition of Bitcoin available for reserves. So as you can see here, each country is at different stages. So, El Salvador, also a user, is asking about the issue of taxes and about Bukele having removed 2 specific sections from the Bitcoin law in El Salvador. We're also going to discuss that. Well, here you can see how each of them is doing. You see that the United States and Switzerland are ahead. And what this reflects is a race for the global option of Bitcoin, where very important things are happening worldwide and in terms of game theory. Game theory is how I position myself as an individual, as a company, as a state to have Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. So if we go more specifically, Jose, to the diagram within the United States, what you are going to see here is a map with the states that are already enacting laws, that are taking them to their Congresses, okay, to pass a law that allows them to do so, regardless of what the federal government or the Trump administration does. That they themselves can start to treasure Bitcoin as a strategic reserve. And of course, this is absolute legitimization. I think no one doubts it anymore. Sometimes it surprises me that even with everything that's happening, when you tell people what Bitcoin is, they still think it's a scam or that it's going nowhere and stuff. So I also insist, because I know that you like them, sometimes to talk about altcoins. I insist on this because this is what's happening with Bitcoin, and it's not happening with other cryptocurrencies. And this needs to be explained because Bitcoin is ultimately a real asset. Even though it's digital, it's the only real digital asset. The rest of cryptocurrencies are projects of companies, foundations. Well, yes, technologies, let's say pieces of software that we need to see how they develop and evolve. But in this case, we already have a very solid value proposition. What you see here in this diagram with the progress in each line, if you pay attention, what it represents is the moment when the state encounters specific milestones. And the introduction of the proposal, whether it's been approved in committee, whether it's been voted on in the House, and whether the law has been enacted. So here you have North Dakota, South Dakota, Massachusetts, Texas, very important states in the United States that are already raising this issue. So I would like to see this in Spain. In Spain, we're still far from starting to see this, but in Europe, fortunately, and here, Jose, we can also move on to the tweet I shared with you about the Czech Republic. In Europe, what we have is a country where a law has just been signed that exempts everyone who has bought Bitcoin and holds it for 3 years from paying taxes. And want to move or want to live in the Czech Republic. This is incredible. From the perspective of game theory, what this change is telling us is that if you move to Prague and you're there for a while, and you've been holding, which can be seen on the blockchain, you can see it in the addresses, you've been holding your Bitcoin for 3 years or more, and you sell it there to buy a house or to buy a car or for whatever, you don't have to pay taxes. And I would love for other states here, for example, Spain, to say, hey, Bitcoin is becoming a set class on a global level. People are starting to understand it. They're accumulating it. Damn, let's attract the wealth of these people who have been saving in Bitcoin for years and spend it here, spend it on consumption, on starting businesses, on whatever. But let's not penalize the people who have bought Bitcoin, right? Well, I think the Czech Republic is doing this really well, but also their central bank has said that it wants to buy a significant amount of Bitcoin reserves. So there are countries that understand it before others. I think that, as we were mentioning earlier, Giovanni, the topic of El Salvador, I think El Salvador has been a pioneer, a small, humble country, which I'll tell you more about later, where Bukele decided to put it on the map and took a step by adopting a historic technology that changes a lot of things there first, and also giving Salvadorans the chance to get familiar with this new technology earlier. So I think it's something to appreciate, and it's something important. And finally, I'll wrap up the intro, which has been quite long today. Giovanni.
Thank you. Quite interesting. That said, before I wrap up, that's all I wanted to say. We will answer the questions you leave in the chat at the end or during the presentation we're having. On the other hand, and no less important, I have some data that I've been given related to B2M, so we'll also save that for the end, so stay tuned. And go ahead, Javi.
Yes, and the latest news that just came out an hour before the Bit2Me live. It's the topic of Trump, who wants to launch his own ETF. Just like BlackRock and Fidelity have their ETFs, Trump wants to launch another one called Bitcoin Plus. And this would be the first time in history that a president of the United States would link a financial product of this kind to an asset like Bitcoin. So, well, there could be a conflict of interest, obviously, but it's just another example that in the political line that the United States will follow during this legislature, it's going to be incredibly favorable to Bitcoin. It's true, if you look at the price, I think it's around 96,600 right now, and there's no clear movement. We're just kind of sideways. I think the whole market is waiting for news to come strong, that there are confirmed news that some state, fund, or bank starts working directly with Bitcoin. We've seen this with the appointment of Cynthia Lummis, a senator who has been talking very positively about Bitcoin and crypto assets in general. We see this with Paul Atkins, who is the head or president of the SEC, who has been appointed. We see this with Scott Beeson, who is also the director of the Treasury in the United States. And all of them have said at some point that have Bitcoin. So I believe we're on the brink of an important movement. And the overall picture, as you can see, is super interesting.
In fact, Javi, I don't know if it's ever happened to you that people say it's no longer the right time to get into Bitcoin, that it's not the moment because it's in the hands of the big players. And interestingly, many times when I've had those kinds of conversations, it's that they give it importance. They want to know it when those people, the big players like Trump, who wants to do what you were mentioning, are part of global adoption, and it's a moment to get in or not. What would you say in a few words after what you've summarized?
So, in a nutshell, I would say that we've been at this for 8 years, Giovanni, that Bitcoin has been around for 15 years, and what has happened in 2024 with the approval of products like of ETFs, of the issue of Trump's victory, of everything we are seeing as a strategic reserve, combined with the fact that Bitcoin is an absolutely scarce asset and that we're going to face some decisions from the central bank, which will usually lower interest rates due to the slowdown we're seeing in the economy everywhere, makes you think that $100,000, from my point of view, is just the beginning. And also, if you look at the market capitalization, Giovanni, Bitcoin has a market cap of 2 trillion, okay? 2 trillion in the macro sense, in terms of the world's investment assets, is super small. To give you an idea, gold has a market cap of about 20 trillion, which is 10 times more than Bitcoin. If Bitcoin had the market cap of gold, each Bitcoin would cost $1 million. Do we see it so far away? Don't think so.
We can definitely link that. We've already done an overview, as you say, of Bitcoin, what it's becoming, the expectations for this year and the next. That can be linked right now. I already know a bit about Bitcoin. What tools and options do I have to start in a safe and responsible way? We could start precisely with the topic of recurring purchases. It's a super simple, super convenient way for someone to start making those frequent purchases. For example, in B2B, you have the option to make daily purchases, daily, weekly, and monthly. In that line, we've created an article that's really interesting. It asks, what are recurring purchases for? For example, to save in the long term, it's super ideal. It's a way to create that piggy bank, however you want to call it, depending on where you're listening to us from, to do it monthly. Some think of it like the Netflix subscription, the gym membership, etc. Also, it's for short-term trading, because most people are always telling us when the best time to buy is, when the best time to get in is, etc. So it's a convenient way to get out of, to relieve yourself from the overwhelm, the stress, the uncertainty of the price. If you've gone up or down, in quotes, during these times, it doesn't matter to you. And what we've done is make it easier in a very simple way, actually. I've mentioned it before. I don't know if I'm mistaken here or in one of the talks we have with part of the community. I have 2 recurring purchases that I make daily. One of them is €1 daily with Bitcoin and €1 daily with B2M. Then I have another one that's monthly, which I don't usually mention, but it follows that line. It's as easy and simple as it can be. You don't need to have any prior knowledge, and it's a way to start getting into it little by little. As I said, with very small amounts or with something you have left over, all of this is strategies without giving investment advice. How can it be set up? The truth is, it's quite simple. With us, you just have to go to the Bit2Me app, for example, select buy, and then click on recurring purchase. That said, choose whatever you want. For example, what we were saying, buying Bitcoin in a very simple way. You choose daily, weekly, or monthly. In fact, you can have all 3 at the same time. Having one daily, and as I mentioned, I even have another one, and many of the people I've talked to, they have other different ones. On the other hand, the savings part, I don't know if you want to comment a bit on that part, Javi, adding to it. I mean, besides the recurring purchase, we have Bit2Me. How would you explain in a few words what Bit2Me is for a user who is just starting and wants to make the most of it?
For those who are just starting, well, what Ivan said is very important. First, don't use money that we are going to need in the short term. That's important, that it's money we want to save for the medium and long term. Okay, let's invest in Bitcoin, or we can invest in other cryptocurrencies. That's to start with. And the strategy that Giovanni mentions is very good, because what you do is reduce the risk that you have. Because every day the price changes, it goes up or down. So if you go shopping every day, you average out. And historically, it has been shown that for those who have done it, it has worked well. Okay? That means that in the end, you are in profit. You are above the average prices at which you have bought. And after a moment, Giovanni, if you want to use a native tool of cryptocurrencies, at Bit2Me, we have made available a service called Bit2Me Air, which allows you to deposit your cryptocurrencies in Bit2Me, whether it's Bitcoin or stable coins, which might also interest you. And Giovanni, I really like this. We'll talk about the case of USDT because I've seen people asking about it. But of course, if you have your salary, you have it in the bank. A, B, or C, I don't care. And you have it in a deposit, they're not giving you anything. They're giving you very little. However, if you have it in a stable coin that can be pegged to the dollar or the euro, and this is also important because look, that the euro has also lost a lot of value against the dollar. In fact, a year or a year and a half ago, the euro to dollar exchange rate was at 1.15, 1.16. And now is at 103, 104. What does that mean? If you decide to have stable coins referenced to dollars within Bit2Me instead of euros in your bank account, apart from saving yourself that 10% drop that has happened over the last year, that doesn't mean it will happen again next year. But anyway, I give this example so that it's understood. If you deposit it in Bit2Me Air, it's also going to generate for you an additional percentage. That depends on your Space Center level. What you have, as you know, the Space Center level refers to the actions you've been taking within Bit2Me, how many points you have, and based on the points you have a different level within the Bit2Me ladder. And depending on the level you have, you can enjoy a series of benefits that are linked to each of the services, including Bit2Me Air. So, if you're, for example, level 3 or level 4 or level 5, then maybe with USDT, or maybe with EURT, well, you get a 3%, 4%, or 5% reward just for having your deposit within Bit2Me. There are no deposit fees or withdrawal fees. If you want, Giovanni, to top it off, I would combine it, like what Giovanni said, you can do it by averaging the purchase, or you can use Bit2Me Pro. Bit2Me Pro has a very small fee. So let's say that making the exchange costs you practically nothing, and then you benefit from that 3%, 4%, 5%, or even more, which can go up to 7% if you have the highest level.
That's right. To sum up then, we have very simple strategies like recurring purchases, which we mentioned, daily, weekly, or monthly. That money that we've been averaging out, we have the option to have it, for example, when we're referring to Bitcoin, put it in Bit2Me, which gives you the option to have a 1%. That said, it's one of the options we have. We also have calculators that make things a lot easier for us, calculators for investment. In this case, for example, we have the one for Bitcoin. Here we have a calculator. In this case, it's for Alpha Bitcoin. It says SA calculator of Bitcoin with a monthly investment of $100. over a year, you would have invested $1,200 at the current value, because that's quite interesting. It would be 1736.46 at the current value, a return of 47.08%. And they have been accumulating it. The Bitcoins, that's one of the options. It's quite interesting, as you mentioned, and also the possibility that you said you can do it with stablecoin. With stablecoin, what you lose is the possibility that it's not just that you're averaging out, but it can also go up, that money. As it happens here, if you had invested $100 monthly for a year, that would be $200. And now at this moment, it's currently 1,736.46. As always, being something average, you can find that maybe in July, to put it one way, those 400 euros or $400 could be 352 months later. The ones that were maybe $800 could be 950, and so on. In other words, that's why you forget about it. You take away the stress of how the market is doing. So they are quite interesting calculators, and I suggest you also check out the two articles. We are referencing, that one is how to prepare for the future with to make a daily Bitcoin purchase and how to save easily. Once again, we continue with the calculator. Let's continue, Javi. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just what Giovanny is saying, right? And I'm reading the comments that are in the live stream. For example, they talk about the B2M token. The B2M token ultimately has specific percentages that you can see based on if you keep it locked in a flexible way, which means you can deposit and withdraw instantly, okay? And with the flexible option, you get an 8% return. The Bit2Me token, the B2M token, is a utility token for the platform, meaning it interacts with the services and products the company offers, like the MasterCard card, whether digital or physical, and the Bit2Me wallet in the lounge for all services. So it gives you a series of advantages and also earns you points within Space Center. And what does it mean that you earn points within Space Center for holding those tokens? Well, it levels you up and improves your interaction with all the services. So regarding the pricing, we've already mentioned that we've had Neil with us a couple of times, who has talked to us and explained the services. And one of them that we've launched more recently, Giovanny, just in case anyone doesn't know, for those of you watching us, is the fixed lock for a set period. So you can decide, and you have different periods where you can leave your B2M. So with the flexible option, as I was saying, it gives you about 8%. 3 months gives you 12.8%. 6 months gives you 14.14%. And 12 months gives you 17.32%. Well, these are obviously percentages. That allows you, if you're going to work with Bit2Me for a long time, to have those tokens set aside and benefit from the other services while you have those tokens there. Obviously, opening up in Argentina and considering opening in other markets can invite new users to discover Bit2Me and help it grow. The issue of listing it on other exchanges is something we've been debating for a long time, but listing it on other exchanges comes with a high cost as well. Why? Because you have to provide liquidity, go through a series of legal steps, and see which partner to work with. And that, well, it's true that it can attract more users to buy the token, but what we want is for those who use B2M to also interact with the platform. It's a bit of a challenge.
Look, to summarize, it's quite important to differentiate, as you always say, between Bitcoin and other assets. In this case, it's Bitcoin, as you've perfectly mentioned, and then there are stable coins, and we have B2M, which is a utility token, when Javi refers to it. He's talking about the Space Center, the loyalty program of Bit2Me. As you explained well, it gives you points and the possibility of stable levels, which, as they also mentioned, gives us the opportunity, for example, up to an 8%. Regarding the API in Bit2Me, we can indeed combine that with other services, like we've mentioned, directly with the card, which gives us a case that generates a market benefiting the entire B2M ecosystem. Regarding the listing, we've had many discussions about it, and we have it in progress. It's pending. But many times when we start talking to users, what they really refer to is to advertising, to being seen globally. So we're doing that. So listing doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be seen everywhere. Because as of today, where we have the greatest utilities of B2M is within the suite. There are also utilities outside of the suite, like Polycasva. But let's stay on that track. We're creating new services, as you mentioned, Javi, the B2M lockups, which give a lot more points and the possibility to level up. And soon, as most of you already know, the B2M redemptions are coming. Neil will also explain. that to us soon. As we already know, it's scheduled to happen in the first quarter of this year, and then I'll provide some details along those lines. Let's continue quickly. I repeat, I'm going to give some data related to B2M in the end.
Well, and we move on, if you want, to the topic of the new crypto deposit statuses, which within Bit2Me, well, we have a specific menu where you can view in a very simple way. If you have made a transaction outside of Bit2Me or have received a transaction from an external wallet, what is the time? What is the status of that activity you're doing? So until now, when you did it through any network, a notification was sent as soon as it was detected. But of course, since there are blockchains that have long processing times, sometimes the notification might not be enough for many users. So if it takes time to process, some people thought you might have made a mistake or that there was some issue. So we've improved that interaction. We've enhanced the visualization within the menu. If you notice where you're going to see a series of icons in red, green, and gray showing the status of the transaction and whether it's processed, canceled, completed, etc.
The truth is that it's been quite useful. People have liked it and have valued it a lot in that regard because it addressed that uncertainty users had, not knowing what the status was, and many times it was, I open a ticket, they were asking in the Telegram chat, etc. So it's a way for us as users not to have that uncertainty. Honestly, thanks to the team that's always working on those kinds of improvements, and that is part of it. Of the Bit2Me feedback tool, which we often talk about because it's all about the user experience to improve it and maintain our services as well as enhance them or create new ones also. Javi, we have something super interesting, which is the lowest fees ever on Bit2Me Pro. We've reduced it by up to 95% for takers, which is now at 0.01%, and we've completely eliminated them for takers at 0%. In all pairs, we have the Euro stablecoin and stablecoin pair. The truth is that...
Let's ask, because we don't know either, Giovanni, of the people who are live right now, how many of you have ever used the Bit2Me Pro tool, which is the high-frequency trading tool? In case you've heard of it. Well, let's see if you use it, if you know a bit about it, because Giovanni is referring to lowering the fees, which seems interesting to you, right?
This is aligned with the Space Center loyalty program in addition to those commissions. With the loyalty program, you can have a bonus on wallet commissions of up to 100% without spending a B2M, which is super important too. And in Pro, up to 50%. That is to say that it is a tool, as you said. It's for professionals or advanced users, but you have the opportunity to gradually learn through our academy, or often even users who are sharing those types of strategies on how they can use it in a safe and responsible way. It's super important not to jump in, as they say, without having a minimum of knowledge first, because Wallet is designed to be very easy and straightforward, while Bit2Me Pro has a few more advanced tools. Then, also, Javi, we have this part of Tokatin, the Tron currency from January XRP. What can you tell us about it?
As you like. Look, yesterday I had a talk with the University of the Hesperides, and there was a person who was a fan of XRP, and he told me, Javi, you who are such a Bitcoin maximalist, don't you think that XRP, HBAR, XLM, which is a bit of the Ripple conglomerate, which is the company, the issuer of these tokens, is going to succeed because of central bank digital currencies, because of the famous ISO 2022, and these kinds of issues? And I said, look, I believe that Bitcoin is a different value proposition compared to XRP. XRP, if you put up the chart, Jose, we have it there, in case people want to see it. If not, I can tell you about it. XRP in 2017-18 reached a price of about 340 or roughly 350. Since then, it had a significant drop, reaching 0.20. Then it recovered in the 2021 cycle, reaching around $1.50, $2 approximately. And now we are, or in these last few weeks, it has risen again to 340. Of course, for me, if I compare it to Bitcoin, what Bitcoin has done in these years is reach a peak of 20,000, then a peak of 68,000, and now for the moment, a peak of 108,000. So, of course, holding an asset for 8 years, which is also not at all philosophically aligned with what I think about freedom and the ability that Bitcoin gives you to store wealth. Well, honestly, I'm not going to I'm not a supporter of XRP. Also, in the last few days, Giovanni, have you read the news that they have deleted part of the blockchain? They have erased a significant number of important blocks. So it has a level of manipulation, and a level of connection with the Ripple company is huge. And it's also an asset designed for it to be used by the traditional financial system. It doesn't empower you as an individual. Now, that said, if anyone, we have it on Bit2Me, we have HBAR, and we have XLM. If anyone believes that this technology is going to add value to the financial and banking system and doesn't care to invest and support these kinds of projects because they believe they can make a lot more money or think it can appreciate much more than Bitcoin at a certain point, well, hey, to each their own. Giovanni, here, everyone has important things.
First, knowing the project what it is and following the evolution of the project, it is also very important to follow the evolution of the project. Why? To make strategic decisions, I increase my capital except in a strategic way or whatever, because what you are already commenting on is super important. Because many times there are people who enter here in lottery mode, and that's fine. But if you enter in lottery mode, what can happen is the opposite of your intentions to come out with beneficial concepts. Then the best thing is to understand the projects, follow the evolution, and we can follow it. Call it by their web pages. If it is not your project now, you also remember that I was commenting on the victim. It is the same as it is easy and simple to operate. We have also had an important improvement there, which is in the purchase and sale orders from the graph in a super simple way. Basically, with your finger, you can go marking where you would like to buy or where to sell. You have both options, the manual option and the graphical option. The graphical option, in fact, some users have given us good feedback that they would like to have something similar in Bit2Me Pro, meaning always having the opportunity to do it manually. But as I said, we're on that path of improvements.
And having said that, Giovanni, from XRP, I already say that there is one thing that I do encourage you to do, and that is not just put up the graph against USDT or against dollars or euros, but also to chart it against Bitcoin so you can see its historical performance. Yes, there are several coins that have had a positive performance against Bitcoin. One of them is Solana, which has performed quite well. Another is Tron, but well, they are projects that I think you need to keep a close eye on, or you need to get right for it to work out well for you. So, well, we'll leave that open for people to study and evaluate. I think we already know what Bitcoin's proposal is, and the others, as Giovanni is saying, everyone is responsible. And that's why at Bit2Me, we know there's demand. We know there are people who want to have more options, more cryptocurrencies besides Bitcoin. And now we've listed, both on the website and on Pro, Giovanni, a list that includes Europe, Virtual, Clanker, FWO, Sonic, and Trump, which is the meme coin that you all know was launched by the president or his team before taking the office. They also launched one for his wife, the one for Magenia. Griffin Bitcoin, which is also a meme coin. XBT, Caillou, IoT. Anime, Wallet Gas, NPC, Core, FLR, which is also part of the XRP group. Morpho, JTO, and USDC, which is a stablecoin. Anything that uses a basket of cryptocurrencies to maintain stability, okay, linked to the dollar. So, well, these are options, issues that are out there. We've also added Giovanni for deposits and withdrawals, Pendel on the Ethereum network, deposits in the Neutron cryptocurrency, and deposits in RIT. Okay? They are not here yet, and here we have to talk about USDT. With all the pain in our hearts, because it's a coin that has been in the ecosystem for a long time, since 2016, 2017, and we have a good relationship with its founders. But the MiCA law, which is the law in Europe, asks us, exchanges not to list stablecoins that do not comply with the regulations. So, what does it mean to comply with the regulations? Well, a series of requirements that the European Union imposes on Tether, so that it has a series of bank deposits in banks that are here in the European Union. So, companies like Tether that don't want to, let's say, bend to, don't want to adhere to what the politician in Brussels demands. Well, it affects all of us. It affects the customers in the European Union having to delist them. What does that also imply? Well, that means that the coins listed on Bit2Me that are stable coins comply with the regulations required by the supervisor and the regulator. And from the perspective of the security of using that cryptocurrency, Initially, it's positive. We also have to say it. So for those people who use USDT, know that we are going to extend the use of this cryptocurrency as much as possible throughout this year, but that there will come a time, we have already notified users by email that we will make an exchange, that we will exchange USDT for USDT. Just so you know, it has the same value as the dollar, but it is indeed registered in Europe.
Indeed, we have made a statement which they can see. So it was sent to their email and so on. It's super important that you read it carefully, take your time, and note the dates you should keep in mind. Starting from February 25th, you won't be able to buy in wallet in USDT, URT, and some others on the list. Then you'll have until March 21st to sell. You should withdraw these crypto assets or exchange them for other stablecoins that do comply with the MiCA guidelines. You will also be able to have any balances that remain in any of the cryptocurrency services by March 21st automatically and free of charge exchange for any of the stablecoins that are allowed. Also, in other services like the ones we have at Bit2Me, they will also be progressively disabled until March 21st. For those pairs that aren't there, there will be time, precisely because we're going little by little. We're adding some pairs. Bit2Me Pro has improved a lot. We've added a ton of pairs and more pairs in line with the MiCA law guidelines. In services like Bit2Me, they will also continue with normal operations until March 21st, the date when other ones will start to be added. Also, for those in Argentina, please take a look at this. To this statement, in that same vein, we have a guide. Explain to us very briefly, and then I will continue from there. What a stablecoin is and what use it can have. Let's continue on that note.
Well, it's very easy. A stablecoin is a currency that has value or is linked to the exchange rate of the euro or the dollar. We have the euro and the traditional dollar that we use in paper bills or that we use through banks with payment processes like PayPal or Visum and this kind of thing. And now we have the version in cryptocurrency, which would be USB, which would be USB, which would be URT, which would be USB. These types of coins are companies, okay? What they do is use cryptocurrency technology to launch a token backed by bank deposits or by euros or dollars invested in short-term bonds, which is a financial asset that is very liquid, and you can use those cryptocurrencies within the DeFi ecosystem or to send money from one place to another. What are the differences they have with Bitcoin? That at the same time, you always make them say it, because in the end they are, let's say, they're very similar products to the euros and dollars we know, but they offer you a number of important advantages when using them. Can they be blocked even if they're in DeFi? Yes, you need to know that if you take it out of Bit2Me and send it to a DeFi platform, it could be blocked by the company or by the protocol. Okay. However, you can't do that with Bitcoin. It's important for you to know that, but it has a number of advantages. And what I was saying earlier with Giovanni, if you want to leave it in Bit2Me and earn a bonus, a reward of 4, 5, 6, or 7%, you're dealing with a currency that has no volatility, which means you're reducing the risk, and at the same time, it's generating a bonus for you. That's the good thing about it.
Perfect. Right along those lines, Iba, is how we can use stablecoins in Bit2Me. Among other things, as I was referring to, you can transfer them to Bit2Me and get a reward of up to 8%. Right now, we have up to 8%. What's happening? Most users are using a good strategy, which is link those funds directly to Bit2Me car. What does that mean? While I'm not using the funds, I'm receiving a reward of up to 8%. And then with Bit2Me car, I'm also earning. And since I'm not exposed to volatility, I can receive up to 7% depending on my loyalty program, in which we're using stablecoins, Bit2Me car plus Caddy to make the most of it. That said, as I mentioned before, and no less important, we have the reduction of fees in B2B Prop, as I said, down to 0% for maker and 0.01% for taker. So these are strategies you can use with stablecoins. What we were saying, many people, and we've mentioned it in some of the talks we've had, is I know I'm going to make a purchase with 200 euros. We take it and transfer it, ISDT, to URT, and directly to UFS or any of the established ones that are linked with the MiCA law. And you can directly make those purchases with all those strategies where you can benefit. So,
very good.
A bit,
Danny, hey, there's a book I'm finishing up that I want to recommend to you all. It's this one. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's called Bitcoin, The Era of Unconfiscatable Wealth by Adrian Bernabeu. And it's quite interesting. So if you haven't read it, there's that advice.
Reader of the day. Well, we're going to go in that direction with the topic. And nothing. If you want, we can move on to El Salvador. If I'm not mistaken, Giovanni, don't tell me that El Salvador, don't skip anything, please. And from there, I'll give you the data about B2M and also a little surprise we have for the end.
Well, I just want to tell you that El Salvador is a country, as you know, that is a reference point. And in 2021, they approved the Bitcoin law. And, well, you know, led by Nayib Bukele, Bitcoin became legal tender, and also mandatory, which forced you to accept Bitcoin as a means of payment. So now there has been a change. The International Monetary Fund has given El Salvador a loan of $1.4 billion. And one of the conditions has been to remove Bitcoin as mandatory legal tender in El Salvador and to allow taxes to be paid with it. So Bukele has said, well, I'll modify the law. Bitcoin, they give me 1.4 billion. Imagine if other countries take note and say, if I adopt Bitcoin and make it legal tender, the IMF will remove that law for me. It's going to start giving me money. Well, as you can see, Bitcoin serves as a negotiation tool to implement important changes in your country. What is it that we could see? What is the best thing about El Salvador? Well, the best thing about El Salvador, from my point of view, is its people. I mean, the people are charming, super friendly. I encourage you to visit this country because, in addition to its people, it is a country with a lot of life, with a strong desire to move forward. Obviously, they come from a complicated situation. For many years, they had a civil war in the 90s. They had an earthquake in 2001. But the country is beautiful. You have volcanoes. You have super nice places like the beach of Fonte, where there are circular economies based on Bitcoin, where there is amazing on-the-ground work. Salvadorans literally came in droves to the event to learn about what Bitcoin is, because it's also true that the rollout that happened, let's say it stumbled at the moment when people weren't educated on how to use this technology and what it was for. So there wasn't an adoption on the street as big as we would have liked to see, but it is true that there are businesses and many Salvadorans who use this technology in their daily lives. So if you have the chance to go, it's wonderful, the country. The people are super nice, super open. And also, well, if it coincides with one of these Plan B events, which is where we were this year, I encourage you to go, right? So I don't think it's a defeat. I don't think we should criticize Nayib Bukele or take away from the Bitcoin law that it is legal tender. I believe that Bitcoin has to be accepted money. If you want to, not if someone forces you, like with money, fiat. And I think that's one of their differences. And I believe that Bukele is putting his country on the map. He's trying to help by making brave, innovative decisions. And if not today, Salvadorans are still using Bitcoin. I mean, I paid there with the IT network without any problem. So they are very open.
So it's not mandatory now, it's voluntary, right?
It is voluntary. It is not mandatory, but the entire ecosystem is very favorable. And also, there are many businesses that are growing and getting recognized thanks to Bitcoin, because tourism is an important part of El Salvador's economy. As of today, a lot of people are going to do tourism and spend their Bitcoins in Bitcoin. Berlin, there at the Fonte, in Bitcoin Beach, at specific shops around the city. I think all of this helps, and there you can eat some good pupusas, which are like super tasty little cakes made with cheese and meat. And I really will go back to El Salvador. It has been an amazing experience. I'm left wanting more. And well, we only have good things to say, Giovanni, about this country.
Great. Now, let's move on to a couple of questions we have. For example, DC, McLean talks about Bit2Me ties. You mentioned that it was going to have compatibility to add the CSV from other exchanges regarding taxation. At the moment, the B2B tax fiscal report is still not enabled. It will be in the coming weeks. We'll keep you updated if they're adding any improvements. We have no confirmation about that improvement. That said, we're also going to have both educational and training material, in the sense that, for example, many times you, Javi, also do interviews and webinars on how you can declare taxes for businesses, for users, etc. And like us at Bit2Me, with just one click, you can download the tax report, and it's almost just copy and paste. Basically, we provide where the amounts are and the boxes where you need to fill them in. So on that topic. We will be updating the information a bit. On the other hand, I've seen Miguel Angel asking, why? Can you no longer see the withdrawal fees for crypto assets from Bit2Me? Before, you had a list for a withdrawal of writings or for a reduced one. That said, the truth is no. The bitumen doesn't have and doesn't charge for withdrawals or deposits. Indeed, what there is a commission from the mining network. So it will depend on many factors. That's why we don't have that option, because it would be like setting a fixed fee. That doesn't exist at the moment. Okay. Anyway, I passed to Jose. We have an article that outlines the structure of all the fees we have in B2B, what we don't charge for, and what does have a cost. Also, just a little more. Let's continue, Javi.
Well, that's been a bit of it. We've been at it for an hour. The truth is, it flew by. Many people watching live. As always, Giovanny. If you like the show, well, hey, give us a like. We love to see you hitting that like button. And what Giovanny said, we will return with more content. Will Neil come back? Will the colleagues come back? This 2025, as we've said, promises to be very interesting. We're going to be analyzing the news month by month. Also, of course, everything we do at Bit2Me, we want to thank you, right? The company, now when the topic of the tax return comes up, we will talk specifically about how to download the form, the level 1 passengers, or the level 1 or higher space centers, which you can have available. And we will see the compatibility of coin tracking.
I'm going to give you a heads up about that. The level 1 will no longer be necessary to download the tax report. They already confirmed that to us. It's something the community has been telling us. As we always say, we listen. You listen to me. We listen to our community. In this case, we've made it easier, so you don't have to be at level 1 and other things. As I promised, I have information, I have data about B2M. Which one of the things you've been asking us about since before the end of the year and starting the renewal of the B2M pool? It continues. With the 250 million B2M, how is it going to be distributed? As until now, distribution of the pool, 50 million. The base pool is distributed among all the B2M in ER, whether they are flexible or locked, regardless of the level of the space center. We also have the 100,000 B2M. In the level pool, it is distributed in a tiered manner among the space center levels from 1 to 7. The higher the level, the greater the reward. Level 0s don't receive anything. Now let's go. Another 100,000 B2M for the lock pool, which is distributed in a tiered manner among the 3, 6, and 12-month locks. The flexible ones don't receive anything this time, and the longer you lock it, the higher percentage of the pool you get. So it's super important that they had asked us about this. Now, there's also something very interesting. We have the B2M locks and early unlocks, and remember that to lock, we have some locking conditions. In this case, for anyone who has unlocked or made an early unlock, the following happens. Impact of early unlocking. More than 4 million B2M has been deducted for early unlocking. And more than 1 million B2M has returned to the pool generated by the APIs of those funds, which are now distributed among all the locked funds. Another super interesting topic. This will appear, as we have said, on the B2M website. Because we are starting to add, update, and input real-time data, then they take a look at that. Then we have another part, no less important, that we are very proud of, and thanks to all the B2M holders, we are more than 100,000 B2M holders. It's a milestone that we've achieved. On the website, you can see and verify it. Although it was the data, it is not displayed correctly because, as I said, we are making some updates and we are not going to put a fixed data, but we're going to show the information in real time in future updates. How do those numbers look? On the Ethereum network, we have 1,124 B2M, and on the Mati network, we have 70,793, 7793, and in Bit2Me, approximately 75,000. Currently, it shows 71,251, but that number needs to be corrected. Then on the BC network, we have 14,469. I also don't know if there's a chance you could share some extra data that we have lying around. Jose, regarding the publication, it says that almost 20,000 new users have become token holders, more than 5,500,000,000. From B2M, more than 120 million B2M have been distributed. in B2M rewards. Over 40 million B2M have been distributed in rewards from other coins. Over 15 million B2M have been distributed in cap houses based on the levels of Space Center. We've launched a new B2M locking utility to reduce a higher API. At times, they've exceeded 20% of the API, with over 1.4 billion B2M locked, which is almost 30% of the total supply. We have distributed more than 600,000, 6,400, more than 600,000 euros in commission discounts for buying and selling, exchanging based on the levels of Space Center. And finally, in the last year, the market value of B2C, it has gone up for me more than 160%, thus validating users' interest in acquiring to make the most of the utilities. So thank you. Congratulations. And also, in that line, I told you that I also had a final surprise. And as we speak, there are users entering the ecosystem. Despite the noise you've heard about Siga Meme Coin, etc., in one way or another, you already know what Bitcoin is and want to see how you can use those services safely and responsibly through Bit2Me. So we're holding some exclusive introductory talks with Bit2Me, okay? These talks are literally talks. It's important. It's not a presentation, but an introductory chat aimed at getting to know the main services of B2B and safe, responsible usage strategies. What's the most interesting thing about this? Who is it aimed at? For the newcomers who can ask freely about the use of B2B, for the veterans, because it gives us the opportunity to share the most common experiences and strategies. I'll be there to be leading it. But who is going to share that information, that user experience, that strategy? You veterans, the passengers, the ambassadors, the moderators, and anyone who wants to get involved will continue. Then it will be via Google Meet with limited access, because it's super important that you have the microphone too, because what I'm saying isn't a total talk. And it's going to be next Thursday, February 13th at 6 p.m. Spain time. So I look forward to seeing you there. We're going to leave it in the link too, here in the description and through the usual communication channels, ours, like it is on Telegram. And even if you reach out to support, we'll also leave that option there. As for me, that's about it.
You explained it, man, phenomenally. 22 memory lanes, a machine. Yes, sir. We put the finishing touch with what Giovanny has mentioned about all this information regarding the B2M token. Obviously, Neil and the team will be in touch in the near future to update us on what you're asking. Also about the burning, the use of B2M to buy points, etc. All of that will come. Today wasn't the day for it, but we appreciated Giovanny for giving us those figures as well to put things in context and have a clearer picture of where we stand. So, well, it has been a real pleasure. Honestly, today's program felt really short to me. We hope it has brought you value too, that you have a vision for the coming months. Interesting. And we'll see each other soon, because Giovanny and I will be here, of course, with Jose at the controls. So without further ado, we send you a huge hug and thank you for joining us. See you next time. See you soon.
A hug.